Going to talk about fatigue in the context of sickle cell disorder. Fatigue can be caused by various factors working in combination. This obviously includes the medical condition itself, but a lot of other factors can interact as well. This includes lifestyle, stress, workplace problems, or grief. There are a number of other factors that can also impact on fatigue. What are the symptoms of fatigue? For people who don't suffer from fatigue, their concept about fatigue is that it's a lack of sleep, feeling sleepy or tired. But fatigue is broader than that. It's a lack of energy, which can be very deep and debilitating. But it can also manifest as headaches or dizziness, muscle aches, irritability, or brain fog and the difficulty in concentrating. What about in sickle cell disorder? What are the different aspects that feed into the fatigue? Well, there's the anemia itself and a huge amount of bone marrow activity. Acute and chronic pain contribute to fatigue, as well as life disruption and lifestyle. What do we mean by lifestyle? This could include how much sleep you're getting or your patterns of sleep, how much exercise you're getting or lack of exercise, use of alcohol or drugs, or simple things like your diet. What about your work? If you're working shifts or long hours, that can contribute to fatigue. You may be suffering from stress or burnout, depending on the type of work that you do. Or it could be things like the temperature at work, whether it's too hot or too cold. There's also the issue of what the relationships are like between you and your colleagues or you and your boss. These can all feed into fatigue. We know that pain is also an element of fatigue. Both acute and chronic pain will contribute to fatigue. And life disruption means that people with sickle cell disorder will often have the unpredictability of their crises impacting on their fatigue. Always having to give excuses to people as to why they can't come to something. Always having to cancel plans, rearrange things, move deadlines. These all contribute to fatigue. But I want to go into a little bit more detail about what's happening biologically. Now, it makes sense to think that sickle cell disorder, because it's an anemia, will contribute to fatigue. And that's true. People with sickle cell disorder will have a lower hemoglobin. Lower hemoglobin means that the red blood cells carry less oxygen around, and therefore there's less energy for the body. But the marrow itself, the bone marrow where red blood cells are made, can also impact on fatigue, irrespective of the degree of anemia. So what do I mean by that? Well, if we look inside the bone marrow, this is where the blood factory is. So we have stem cells that can then turn into any of the different types of blood cells in our bloodstream. The red blood cells, the different types of white blood cells, and the platelets. Let's look in more detail at the red blood cells. If somebody has anemia, so for example, in sickle cell disorder, red blood cells are being destroyed all the time, and instead of red blood cells surviving in the bloodstream for 3 months, they will survive for maybe 3 weeks. There is then a very powerful signal that is sent back to the bone marrow to make more red blood cells. And all these extra red blood cells, the way we can tell that they are being made is that we can see in the bloodstream a high retic count. Reticulocytes are red blood cells that were made in the last 24 hours. So people with sickle cell disorder will have high retic counts. What does that look like in the bone marrow? So on the right, we've got the bone, a long bone called the femur, which is the long bone in the thigh. And you can see that in an adult who doesn't have sickle cell disorder, the bone marrow is only at the end of the bone, just these little dark red spots inside the bone. But somebody with a type of anemia like sickle cell disorder or thalassemia or some of the rare inherited anemias, their bone marrow is completely full because their body's trying so hard to make red blood cells that are just dying so quickly. And so if you think about what's happening to the food you're eating and the energy you have in your body, all of those red blood cells that need to be made so quickly are going to use up all of that energy, and that will contribute to fatigue. So basically, bone marrow activity contributes to fatigue. And for people who take hydroxyurea or hydroxycarbamide, one of the things that we explain is that because it helps the red blood cells to survive longer, that huge drive inside the bone marrow to make more red blood cells is reduced. And as a result, the retic count comes down from high to normal. And this releases a lot of energy that instead of being used to make red blood cells can be used for other things. So I'm not saying that we could go from the bone marrow on the left all the way back to the bone marrow on the right, but people with sickle cell disorder who take hydroxycarbamide can get more energy because of that bone marrow activity calming down. So the last few slides I've got are a visualization of what it's like when you've got different aspects of your life that are contributing to fatigue, and they are offset by the aspects of your life that are contributing to energy. Now, we haven't gone through what those things might be, but they will be things like, it could be your work. We've talked about work being stressful, but for some people, their work is something that gives them energy. It could be your friendships, your relationships, your family, or various other things you do with your life. So for somebody who's got their fatigue elements do outweigh the energy elements, one way to sort of redress the balance is to get rid of some of the fatigue elements. And that's what I was talking about with the hydroxyurea and the bone marrow activity. And when you get rid of some of the fatigue elements, you sort of even out this balance. The other way to do it is, if you can't reduce the fatigue elements, can you increase the energy elements? And that would also help to redress the balance. So I'm going to finish here. What we want is people who are living with sickle cell disease, sickle cell disorder, to get a full battery, to have energy. And there's different ways of doing that. And hopefully I've gone through some of them today. Thank you.